accountability and openness, but we also are very inclusive. So we have a culture of we have a very much an aggressive focus on growing, and that is largely driven by the industry's speed of change and needing to adapt to that change as it happens. We're very passionate about our people and how they're empowered to be creators as well, but also be empowered to say they don't think that idea is good, no matter if that's their boss that's presenting the idea, but to be able to freely share their ideas and to freely push back is a culture we try to foster, so that we're actually getting to the heart of problems much faster rather than just perhaps going down a path that we shouldn't, that takes a lot longer to correct.
Welcome to Grow Think Tank. This is the one and only place where you will get insight from the founders and the CEOs of the fastest growing privately held companies. I am the host. My name is Gene Hammett. I help leaders and their teams navigate the defining moments of their growth. Are you ready to grow? We all know that the people in our organization are really the most important aspect of how we scale the business. You as a leader that are listening into these episode after episode want to be a better leader, but you also want to have a culture that really demonstrates what does it take for us to succeed in this marketplace. Today, we dive into a culture of game changers, what that really means, how they get there. And our special guest today is the founder of SongTradr, number 31 on the Inc. list in 2021, but they are an impressive company. We're talking with Paul Wiltshire about this culture of game changers and really what does that really mean to create this space where people feel included, they share these ideas, there's a sense of collaboration, and all of this centers around the innovation that is going on inside of his business. Now, your business may not be changing as fast as the music industry, but what could you learn from someone like Paul, who has amassed a team of over 300 people that are working together as a machine? This culture of game changers is the topic for today, and hopefully you find it as interesting as I do. Before we get to the key message, let me just invite you into a special offer I have for you. If you are a leader of a company and you want to figure out what is getting in the way of you growing, maybe you feel a sense of loneliness, or maybe you feel like people just aren't getting the message, they don't feel aligned as much as you want them to. All of this comes back to your leadership. I say this with an openness sense to this, and hopefully you don't take this the wrong way, but it all comes back to you. If you want more alignment, more collaboration, more trust, it comes back to your leadership and how you set the tone, you leading by example, and you've got to lead powerfully. If you want to figure out what's getting in the way of you leading more powerfully and creating the company that you just absolutely adore, then all you have to do is go to genehammett.com and schedule your call. Inside that, we'll have a conversation that will be different than we've had before. I will aim to serve you. I'm not here to sell you anything. In fact, we'll take that off the table, that first conversation, because I just want to serve you in some way, give you a better sense of awareness of what's getting in your way, give you a plan to move forward, and give you some insight around what's really going on. All that inside that first conversation with me. It's absolutely free. All you have to do is go to genehammett.com and schedule your call. Now, here's the conversation with Paul. Paul, how are you?
I'm good, thanks, Gene. It's nice to be here.
Thanks for being on the podcast. We're going to talk about a culture of change makers. Before we get there, I want to let you talk about the company. So tell us about SongTradr.
SongTradr, well, perhaps I'll go back a step before I explain SongTradr. I started out my career as a musician. So I loved music. I created music. I was a songwriter and a producer. And through that journey, I discovered just how hard it is to license music. So SongTradr was built on the back of wanting to solve the problem of how to license music efficiently in the music industry. And so SongTradr is a marketplace for connecting music creators and music owners to B2B music licensees, which are advertisers, film, TV, brands, gaming, anyone who uses music and content.
Well, I know that the whole industry has made a huge revelation. I'm kind of curious, what do you see as the innovation around the corner for music?
Well, we've all seen the innovation on the B2C, which is on the B2C aspect of music, where we've seen Spotify and Apple Music really change the way we consume music, where we've got access to the entire library of all music in history. The B2B works quite differently in that it's all about matching music to particular content. And there is complexity in music rights that has made it largely inefficient and in need innovative technology to really be a change maker so that that efficiency can exist for all. So we see the opportunity as an enormous one because of how music plays a role in just about every touch point in life. Like we're on an app, we're on TV, or watching Netflix, we're at least on a Peloton to meditation. It's music touches everything we do, and so our destination is to be at the forefront of that, of transactions between businesses and music supply.
Fantastic. Your company has been recognized by Inc. magazine, number 31 on the Inc. list, over 9,000% in a 3-year period. Your employee count around 300 plus. What do you think are the keys to the culture that have made this possible?
Well, we definitely have a culture of accountability and openness, but we're also very inclusive. So we have a culture of we have a very much an aggressive focus on growing, and that is largely driven by the industry's speed of change and needing to adapt to that change as it happens. We're very passionate about our people and how they're empowered to be creators as well, but also be empowered to say they don't think that idea is good, no matter if that's their boss that's presenting the idea, but to be able to freely share their ideas and to freely push back is a culture we try to foster, so that we're actually getting to the heart of problems much faster rather than just perhaps going down a path that we shouldn't, that takes a lot longer to correct.
You just rattled off quite a few of the key words around principles that I've been talking about for years. And I know you probably haven't listened to too many episodes of this because we've just been introduced, but I have done hundreds of interviews with founders and CEOs like yourself, looking at the patterns across culture and leadership that get people to grow a company fast. You mentioned accountability, openness, growth, adaptiveness, empoweredness, sharing ideas. There's no coincidence. I think you just have your finger on the pulse of what these things are altogether. Where did it come from for you?
It's a good question. I think possibly it relates to my previous life as a songwriter and a record producer. It's all about collaboration. So if you're recording a band or you're working with a young artist to develop a song that they're hoping is going to be that hit song that everyone relates to, you have to be working together and listening to each other's ideas and encouraging each one's ideas so that the best creative result comes out of that. It's so easy for insecurity to get into that dynamic, and that insecurity can have so many negative effects and consequences. So perhaps it's embedded in that previous life, and my wife, who's chief people officer, was also my partner in that previous life. We were both songwriters and constantly working with other musicians and artists in that space, and it's all about collaboration to get the right result.
We talk about this a lot with my clients. Collaboration, they all want more of it, but they have a tough time to get there because you hire in people that are very good individually, they're competitive. In some cases that works, but when you want more collaboration and that's not natural to them, it can be difficult. You had talked about some stuff, Paul, with my research team about a culture of change makers. Let's start by just describing what that is.
So I think having a culture of change makers for us it's partly about what we do to change the industry. And the music industry is an interesting beast because it's been around for a long time, and it's gone through such a huge transition from a physical product to a digital product. And most of the innovation has come from technology companies building on top of the industry. And I think our approach has been, we're musicians using technology to transform the industry. So at the heart of what we do, we kind of know how the industry works rather than trying to tell the industry how it should work using technology. We're building collaboratively, it's that same process with the industry to make that change. And there's sort of so many elements to that we could dive into, but perhaps pause there for another question.
Well, I want to dive into the collaborativeness, because again, I was talking about this in an earlier question. A lot of founders want more collaboration. It's natural to you and what you're doing. How do we inspire this across the company?
I think it's inspired throughout the company by really really encouraging people to own certain aspects. So we have very clear accountability. We actually use a system that also helps guide this process. It's a system called EOS. You may have come across, but it allows very much, for example, rock setting every quarter, so that everyone's very clear on what their focus, their key focus, what's going to change the environment for them and the company and the product that they may be working on with that core focus that month. So setting rocks that all ladder up to the overall company targets and goals for the year, so that the entire organization is working and humming as one. Now, it's not to say that that sounds like a perfect scenario. It's never like that, right? There's always things to fix and improve and change. But I think at the heart of it, it's really alignment on vision, alignment on execution, and having sort of underlying cultures like freedom to be able to talk about any issues, freedom to be able to a culture of inclusiveness, a culture of being able to contact the CEO if they feel like they want to bring up something, not that have to go through many different layers. So we are just that, a very open. We haven't sort of read books to determine our ways of working. It really is about being open, being approachable, being understanding as much as possible. So you're listening to people's issues or listening to people's concerns, and being able to really assist them when it comes to problems when they arise.
Now, Paul just talked about alignment on vision. There's a lot of things inside that conversation, but I want to just dive into this one little piece. How do you create alignment on vision? Well, there's a lot to it. You have to hire the right people that have a vision for where you're going. But one of the things I know that gets in the way of a lot of leaders is communication of that vision. They need to communicate it in a very powerful way. They need to do it in a way that really gets people aligned around the emotions of the vision, what we're trying to create here. You can't do this from a logic standpoint. You got to make sure your message connects to their heart. And the second thing is you want to do it differently. You will have to talk about the vision many times. Some people will see it in certain ways. Some people need a little bit more data behind it. But you want to talk about the vision differently so that it connects with different people in different ways. Everyone perceives things differently. I'm a visual person. I want to see the vision of the vision, if that makes sense. And then finally, there's something that always gets in the way of people communicating their vision effectively, and that's, I shouldn't have to repeat myself. Well, I'm going to tell you right now, you will have to repeat yourself, because you want to make sure that you're saying it enough that people really understand it. They could repeat it back to you. It could even be an inside joke about how often you talk about the vision and what we're creating, because that is a guidepost, a North Star, if you will, of how you're going to get to where you're going to be. And you want to have to repeat it as often as necessary until everyone finds that sense of alignment. That's my 2 cents on this. Back to Paul. You've got a pretty big team. Most of the Inc. companies are smaller than you. I guess you probably know that. Maybe you don't. But you've scaled up to this size team. You have your wife as the chief people officer. What do we see inside your organization that you feel like it might be unique or different than other companies?
I think we've always had a focus on experience within the company. So it's been a challenging time the last 2 years that when COVID hit and suddenly we're not in an office together, and that sort of really, I think, created the challenge of having to create an inclusive feeling, connected company online. Now, we're not alone in that. Obviously, there's been many companies that have done that, but we've always had this focus on culture and what it means. So defining our core values and very much hiring by those core values, ensuring that everyone that we bring into the company is aligned to those core values, and we use those core values to really test all of our decision making, so that we try to avoid, I think, people that are not compatible with the way we work. Generally, it works out that if we're hiring on that basis, that we have a much more connected community, and that's moving in the right direction. Now, is that wholly unique? I don't necessarily think so, but it's something that we 100% believe in and follow.
I'm a huge fan of the core values from a sense of living them day in and day out. You mentioned the term testing decision making. Is there an example that you can share with us to make sure we understand what you mean by using the values to test that decision making?
Well, it might be testing our decision making of making a choice whether we hire person A or person B. Is person A more aligned? Person B may have more qualification, may even have perhaps just in all ways rates a little better from skill, but doesn't align to our core values where person A does. So it's choosing between making that as a sort of guiding light as to who we decide to work with. And we don't just, it's not just limited there. We've done a lot of M&A over the last, in particular last year. So we did 6 transactions last year. And so those core values are also used to determine whether a target acquisition is going to fit when we bring the companies together.
That's one of the hardest parts of any M&A is making sure that the cultures mix together. So what I'm hearing you say is we're actually looking at the core values of these potential mergers and seeing if they're a fit beforehand. And is that really one of the requirements you have for a good target?
It's a key deciding factor. So it's not, we're obviously not just looking for core value fits as a guide to what we acquire. We're acquiring businesses that plug into our ecosystem and accelerate our growth. But we won't just buy a company if it's the perfect match, but the core values don't align, because we know that's going to cause friction that could impact how technologies work together, how successfully we'll be able to roll out a collective product offering, how well the teams we can collaborate. So we're very careful about that aspect, and that's part of the journey we go on in the preliminary stage, but also throughout the DD phase.
Well, I'm kind of curious on the core values as it relates to this culture of change makers. How did you come up with your core values, and have you refreshed them over the years to get to where you are today?
So it was an exercise we started, it must be almost 3 years ago. And it was, our leadership team, and the team was quite small back then. I think the total team was probably 20 people, and the leadership team was probably 4 or 5 of us. And it really was around defining who we are, what we are, what that looks like, and where we're heading, and how do we ensure that the core values are sort of built to last. But they always need refinement, and I think the definitions have changed over time. But all in all, the sentiment and the meaning has not. It's remained largely consistent with our first initial incarnation of it.
Now, Paul was talking about the core values of the company, and I think you have to do this work if you want to create the alignment that he's talking about, this culture of game changers. But I really want you to think about this one aspect of it. Are your values a reflection of who you are now, or are they aspirational? Because this is one of the biggest questions you have to answer. I think it's mostly about the who you are now. You want to hire people that are in alignment with who you are now, not the aspirational values. The aspirational values can fit in there when you have 1 or 2 of these, no more than 50% of who you're becoming as an organization. If you have too many aspirational values, meaning something you hope to be someday, then you will feel like you're never going to get there. So you want to make sure you're attached to some of them. I have one of my clients who has a value, we are transcendent. That's very aspirational. And they're not there yet. They are hitting on the other 3 values very consistently. That's who they are. They're compassionate, they're partners, and they truly do support each other. Now, these values are very important to them, but the transcendent one is aspirational. You have to decide for yourself, how many are you today, and how many of values are aspirational? Just something to think about as you put together your values and begin to live them on a day-to-day basis. Back to Paul. I see that a lot of people do this differently. When you came up with this, did you guys in the executive leadership team come up with them first and then roll them out to the rest of the team for feedback, or did you take a different approach?
We did. We rolled it out. I mean, we were such a small, tight team back then, so it was easy to get feedback. We could all meet in a room around a table at once. It's a little different now, and we've also shared these. In particular, with the recent acquisition, was quite large for us. It was almost 100 people, and they're largely aligned to who they were anyway. And we, part of our presentation, whenever we're doing an M&A transaction, is we want to present the company to them to see who we are, what we are, where we're heading, and if they believe they align with us as well. But no, it's we've always had feedback, and we always take that feedback on. That's part of our collaborative nature, and it lets us better define them over time.
What have I not touched on here that helps you create this culture of change makers?
I think empowerment is a really important thing. So I think it's, and going back to my past, as a record producer, I was very much a control freak. So it's like, even though I would be very collaborative, I would always want more. I kind of want the final say on what this is going to sound like. And just now we've done the initial part, the recording or the composition, let me do my thing to finish it. And I think what I had to learn through the journey of building a company is really empowering people to go, give them the top line and say, this is the intent or the effect we're trying to create. What do you think it should be? How do you think it should work? And I think when someone has ownership like that, and they've got freedom to create, and their brief is not within an inch of its life, and they're not being micromanaged, and every single decision they make they have to check with someone, then you get the best result out of their creativity. And I think you attract people too as part of that are aligned to working like that. So we've certainly found that in our experience gets the best results out of people.
Again, you're hitting on all these core principles of the work. And I don't think I actually explained this, but many times when I talk to people just like you, they talk about this sense of ownership. They want people to feel like owners. And many times it's even if they don't have a financial stake, because in some cases you can't have everyone get options or profit sharing or whatever the financial tools available. But do you talk about ownership of projects and ownership of their roles across your organization?
Oh, we do. I mean, often it's in the form of accountability, and so defining what their role is, defining what they're accountable for, and ownership often comes out of what I referred to before as rock setting. So that they're actually working towards goals that they've participated in identifying, which is partly them being responsible for their journey.
This is such a cool interview. I really appreciate you being here, Paul. We've been talking about a culture of change makers. SongTradr is really impressive with their growth. Really thank you for sharing behind the scenes here.
You're very welcome. It's been great to spend time with you.
Here's what I want to do when I always like to reflect a little bit about these interviews, and I do this while Paul's listening in so he can see where he's made an impact on me and others, is really, what does it take to grow a team? Well, it's not just one person. It takes a true team that is able to work together. We've been using the word collaboration a lot. I think if that's something you want more of, you want to use that, but you want to dig underneath it. You want to really create space where people feel empowered, feel safe to share those ideas, and that you are have some guidelines. I think these core values are the guidelines. When you're not there, they're the ones these tools can be used for hiring and selecting and onboarding, but also developing people and rewarding and recognizing them. A lot of the work we do here is helping you understand how to become a better leader. So if you have any curiosity whatsoever, what is it going to take for you to be a more powerful leader, inspire a sense of ownership? I'd love to talk to you about your business, about what's really going on, and reflect back and give you some feedback on where that's going. It's absolutely free, and I don't want to sell you anything. I truly want to serve you if you're an audience listening to this deep of the conversation. So just go to genehammett.com and schedule your call. When you think of growth and you think of leadership, think of Growth Think Tank. As always, lead with courage. We'll see you next time.